Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to start by looking at a war game simulation that asks a genuinely terrifying question about modern warfare. I mean, we all know we rely heavily on space, right? But how secure is the ultimate high ground really? Today, we are unpacking the strategic intent and the honestly mind-bending technology behind India's rapidly evolving space defense architecture.
So we're starting with what's called the IndSpaceX Scenario 4 simulation. And in this wargame, it's green versus orange forces, facing an absolute nightmare. Imagine your power grids collapsing, battlefield networks going totally dark, and sudden, severe intelligence gaps. All because space assets have been compromised by cyber attacks and anti-satellite weapons. You literally wouldn't even know where the attack was coming from.
The simulation states it pretty bluntly. Power grids collapse, along with the internet and battlefield networks, leading to even more gaps in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Basically, if your satellites go down, your modern military goes completely blind. It's no longer just about communication anymore. Space is the next active battlefield for both kinetic and cyber threats.
Section 1. Passive versus active orbital defense.
Now, knowing the threat is one thing, but how do you actually fight back in a vacuum? The Center for Land Warfare Studies points out a massive shift happening right now. For a long time, defense was mostly passive, things like using jam-resistant signals, or literally just moving a satellite out of the way. But passive measures, they just aren't enough anymore. Military doctrine is pushing nations toward active, frankly sci-fi-esque defensive capabilities. We are talking satellite-mounted lasers and robotic countermeasures to actually blind or physically remove enemy threats.
Section 2. Mission Shakti and achieving deterrence. To step into this new active era, India needed a credible deterrent. They had to prove to the world they could actually defend their orbital assets. And this capability didn't just appear overnight. It actually traces back decades to India's ballistic missile defense program. But geopolitical wake-up calls, specifically a 2007 Chinese anti-satellite test, really pushed things into overdrive. That all culminated in March 2019 when India, discreetly and successfully, tested its own technology under the codename Mission Shakti.
The sheer precision required for what they pulled off here is mind-boggling. It was a direct ascent kinetic kill. Now, that doesn't use a massive explosive warhead. Instead, they launched a modified interceptor missile from the ground that hit a satellite moving at insane orbital speeds right in the dead center within just 3 minutes of launch. Think about that. You're essentially hitting a bullet with another bullet, completely blind in the vacuum of space. Wild, right?
When we compare the 4 major powers with this elite capability, the US, Russia, China, and India, notice the deliberate strategic choices made here. Pay close attention to the altitude of the target. Higher altitude tests, like China's back in 2007 at around 865 kilometers, generated thousands of pieces of space debris that are literally still orbiting the Earth today, which caused a huge international outcry.
India, however, specifically chose a low Earth orbit of about 300 kilometers for their test. And that wasn't an accident. It was a highly calculated move to ensure that any hazardous space debris created by the impact would quickly decay and burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. So it allowed them to demonstrate this massive kinetic capability while still playing by the rules of international outer space treaties and minimizing the risk to everybody else's satellites.
Section 3. Forging the Defense Space Agency. Because obviously, you can't just have the technology. You need a dedicated command structure to actually manage it. So in 2019, the government operationalized the Tri-Service Defense Space Agency, or DSA, down in Bangalore. Their entire goal is to integrate space assets from the Army, Navy, and Air Force into one unified, comprehensive space warfare strategy.
But the military knows it can't build all of this alone. To reduce foreign dependency and really spur innovation, the government launched Mission DEF Space. This initiative laid out 75 specific defense space challenges, directly funding private startups to solve them. For example, a startup named Pixel got funding to build advanced, multi-payload 150-kilogram satellites for the Air Force. It just proves that the private sector is absolutely crucial to this whole new defense architecture.
Section 4. The Space Surveillance Network.
Now, a military command is completely blind without eyes in the sky. So following border conflicts in the mid-2020s, India poured a massive investment into the Space-Based Surveillance Phase 3 project. We're talking roughly 27,000 crore rupees, which is about 2.9 billion US dollars. That right there proves just how seriously they are taking the operationalization of this domain.
So what does a nearly $3 billion budget actually buy you? Well, these aren't just a few cameras strapped to a rocket. We are talking about 52 new military surveillance satellites, with the first batch fast-tracked for 2026. They'll use synthetic aperture radar to literally see in the dark, and, critically, they'll connect directly to ground-based air defense weapons to intercept hostile aircraft. Oh, and if one happens to get shot down, they're developing launch-on-demand capabilities to just rapidly replace them.
Section 5. Bodyguards and Active Defense.
Okay, this brings us to the most futuristic element of this whole ecosystem, and it was reportedly sparked by a tense near collision with a foreign satellite back in 2024. To protect against hacking or kamikaze intercepts, India is developing what are literally being called bodyguard satellites. Think of them like a personal security detail for critical space infrastructure. These are highly maneuverable spacecraft that hover near valuable assets, and they can actually use robotic arms or directed lasers to physically neutralize approaching threats.
Supporting these bodyguards is an incredibly complex web of advanced tech. Startups like Deganthra have launched commercial space surveillance sensors capable of tracking objects as small as 5 centimeters. That is basically tracking a golf ball hurtling through orbit. Add in LiDAR for rapid 3D threat mapping and built-in electronic warfare resistance, and you ensure the military can still function perfectly even if standard GPS is jammed.
By merging the booming commercial space industry with strict defense imperatives, this entire architecture represents a really monumental shift. It moves the nation from relying solely on passive survival up in orbit to embracing a highly resilient, active capability, a system that can take a punch and hit right back. And that leaves us with a critical thought to end our explainer today. As nations all across the globe build out their own bodyguard satellites, their own kinetic interceptors, and these massive surveillance networks, does this ensure peace through strength and mutual deterrence, or are we simply inevitably moving human conflict out of the atmosphere and into the stars? Think about that for a minute.